I'm the Miniac, and today we're talking about the first generation of the Mini, specifically the R53 Mini Cooper S. Alright, the R53 Mini Cooper S was built between the years of 2002 and 2006. In 2006, it ended its production run with the halo car, the GP, a very rare vehicle, and if you happen to find one, very expensive. So I have today two vehicles. One is a pre-facelift 2004, and the other one is a post-facelift 2005. So what is different about these cars? Well, mainly it's cosmetic and some other minor changes to suspension. That's about it, really. So we're going to start off with the 2004 Cooper S. Now, what the difference is between this and the new one is the grille was slightly different. It has a kind of a trim detail, a little bit more formal, kind of harkening back to the first generation of the Mini. They also had different Xenon headlights. Now, these are the Xenon headlights, but they changed them in the facelift cars. So not too much was different between the two on the front, apart from some cosmetic changes. Now, on the rear of this car, the taillights were different. They had turn signals, and the lower part of these taillights were the fog lights. Now down here was your reverse light for this car. On the facelift cars, that changed, and I'll talk about that in a bit. So coming around to the interior of these cars, some changes they made to the interior. This one does have the 3-spoke steering wheel, which was an option in 2004, but it was actually a 2-spoke steering wheel in the 2002-2003 models. They also changed the airbag placement for the passenger side. This is where it's placed on the 2004, 2003, and 2002 models. On the 2005, 2006, it's up in the top of the dashboard. So they changed that up so it was a little different. Apart from that, they made a few little changes, but most of it is pretty much exactly how it was through the entire generation of the car. Alright, this is a 2005 Mini Cooper S. This is the post-facelift car. Now, what did they change on this car? They changed the grille, so it was a smoother panel instead of that more elaborate detailing. This is a John Cooper Works grille, though, so it's going to be a little different than the factory one, and than the Cooper S one anyway. They also changed the headlights. Now, if you look here, you can see they went to something a little bit more stylized, a little bit more elaborate. This actually is a common headlight on a Morgan. I'm not sure which Morgan it is, but they have used it, except on that car it looks kind of cross-eyed. But they've used it on other cars, but it was fairly common on this particular vehicle. Now, another neat thing about the first generation of the Mini is the headlights could point in two directions. They could either point forward or they could point up. Not exactly a useful tool, but it was kind of funny. Now, apart from the engine, the cars were pretty much very similar, or identical actually. The engine didn't change much, so it really comes down to personalization. In the case of this car, the owner did some unique things here, a Heineken intake. He changed out the coolant expansion tank. This is a problem that's known in this generation of Mini. It will crack occasionally, and it's best to replace them when they do. I've replaced mine when I had my R53, so it's not an unusual thing. They had a slightly different engine mount in the R53 from the 2002 to 2004 model year. However, this one has the newer engine mount, which is a canister type BMW component. They also had a tendency to have issues with strut tower problems. Now, the problem with that was they mushroomed if you impacted a pothole or a large bump. That was more common with the 2005 to 2006 models because they softened the suspension because customers were complaining that the suspension was too stiff. I fail to see why they would complain about it. That's the whole point of a Mini Cooper. It's a stiff suspension because it's like a go-kart on steroids. But people complained, BMW changed it, and the result was we had strut mounts failing and strut towers failing. So the way to fix that issue, this one has that problem, was to install strut tower defender plates, basically made by Craven Speed or M7. I'm sure there were other companies that made them, but those are the two really common ones. My personal favorite is Craven Speed because it's a very thick mount, or a very thick plate, and it really holds everything together. Now, strut mounts were another thing that tended to fail a lot. I replaced my strut mounts with fixed camber plates because I got fed up with replacing strut mounts every time they failed. They can be a little costly to have the dealership do, but if you do it yourself, you save a little bit of money. I recommend that if you're mechanically inclined. If you're not mechanically inclined, let the dealership do it. They know what they're doing. So this is the engine of a post-facelift R53. Now, the two engines are very different in the fact that the owners changed them and personalized them to their tastes. So in this one, there's a lot of red accents. There's M7 gaskets. There's a carbon fiber intake. There's some really nice Canton expansion tank and reservoirs back here, so really nicely done. They also have the strut tower plates. Now this is the M7 strut tower reinforcement plates, or strut, they call them strut tower defenders. So these were unique because you could also get a strut bar that mounted with it. So this stiffens up the whole front end of the car. That being said, it's kind of pointless to have a strut bar. These cars are so stiff anyway, but he has it. This car also has coilover suspension, so nice options, changes to these cars. You could do almost anything to them. You could even change the pulley. Now, you probably can't see it down here, but I don't even know if you can see it. Oh, there's the pulley, but you might not see it on camera, but this one has, I think it looks like a 17% reduction pulley. It might be a 15%, but that was a common thing to do on these cars, and the cool thing was, on my R53, I had a 15% reduction pulley, but it could be removed from the hub and replaced with a smaller 17% reduction pulley. So you could change the horsepower on your vehicle just by unbolting the old pulley and putting on a new one. You would also have to, of course, replace the belt because you need a smaller belt to go along with it. This car also has a oil catch can. Now, this is fairly common accessory for intercooled cars, and I've seen it on a lot of the turbocharged ones, but I've also seen them on supercharged ones. It basically catches the oil, keeps it from getting into your engine and causing more problems. Now, you don't want problems with these cars because they have enough to begin with as being how old they are. All right, one of the other things you got to look for in an R53 is rust. Now, even an R50 or an R52, those same models are from this generation. Rust problems occur on almost any car. In the case of the R53, R50, and R52, the first generations of the Mini, one of the biggest problems is usually around the door frame. And in this case, if we pull this away, you can see that there is in fact rust here. So it's not super severe. It looks like it's just surface rust. So this could be fixed just by some sanding and some primer. I don't think it's not gone through to the other side, and it's not really affecting the whole integrity of the vehicle. So it is something to look for. If you're concerned about it, ask someone who knows. This doesn't look like it's terrible, but it is something to watch out for. Now, on the other locations to look out for, the gas cap. Now, my R53 had some rust bubbles underneath the paint. They had to replace the entire quarter panel because that's just the way they do it. They don't want to just patch it. Now, my car, it was replaced under warranty. These cars are fairly old now. It's out of warranty, so you'd probably be on your own having to do that. But it's not usually a difficult thing if they replace the whole quarter panel. It can be costly. So, and if you're not comfortable doing the repairs yourself or paying for those kinds of repairs, you might want to avoid this car. On another location to be concerned about is around the taillights. Now, this 2004, there's rust bubbles along the bottom line at the bottom of the taillights, and it's actually even gone right through the metal. That's something that can be fixed. They still have to replace the whole panel. There are shops that will patch this. Now, I don't recommend patching because it still means that the rust could get somewhere else, and it means there's water somewhere trapped inside this panel. Now, it's not something difficult to fix in the fact that they can replace the whole panel. If you're not comfortable with rust on your vehicle, don't bother buying this car. Look for better examples. But if you're okay with doing repairs on your own and this does not scare you away, go for it. Despite the rust issues, it's still a fantastic car to drive. There's other little wear and tear parts on these cars, but given the fact that this is a 2004 and that's a 2005, they are 13-year-old cars. So it's not unusual to find problems on a 13-year-old car. The fact that they've held up so well, even being that old, I've seen cars that are 10 years old or younger that are falling apart a lot more than these two are. Now, with these cars comes infinite options. Now, this one does not have a sunroof, if you can look over here and see this. That's not a terrible thing. It's actually really good for autocross racing because it keeps the car nice and stiff. This one does have a sunroof. Now, I liked the sunroof. I had one on mine. I have one on my other car. But it does add weight. So if you're going to be racing these, find one that doesn't have a sunroof. If you just don't want a sunroof, find one that doesn't have a sunroof. They're not that uncommon to find, although the sunroof was very popular. I also recommend, as far as mechanics go, that if you're going to buy an R53, get one with a 6-speed manual transmission. That was a standard transmission on these cars. However, there are a lot of automatics out there. I don't recommend the automatic. It's not as much fun to drive, but it's a personal preference thing. You might find the automatic an incredible joy to drive. I find it boring. I'd rather stir my own gears, but that's personal preference. Two other problems I want to talk about. One of them was the recall on the power steering pump and fan for that pump. Now, they're located underneath the engine at the bottom side, so we're not going to be able to show you that without flipping the car over. But that was a recall that is covered by the dealership. I believe it is still under warranty and still covered. If you happen to encounter one that has that issue, it can be fixed. Another very common issue with this generation of Mini was the seat mat sensor on the passenger side tended to have an airbag warning light come on, and it would fail. Now, I'm sure this one is no exception. Basically what happens, there are sensors inside the seat that basically tell if there's a person in the seat, and it tells the computer to arm the airbags, so if you get into an accident, the airbags will deploy. Now, the problem was the sensors were faulty on many of these first generation Minis, and the result was that you'd sit in the seat, the car would not think there's anyone there, and it would set off a little bell saying that the airbag isn't armed and that you need to buckle your seatbelt, or some other weird thing would go on. Mine had a tendency to just ding away until I buckled the seatbelt because it thought someone was sitting in the seat. So there was a sensor issue. That is able to be replaced under warranty. You just bring it into the dealership and they'll replace the seat mat sensor. Some of them have not been fixed even after having the replacement done, but those are very rare instances and not something to be too concerned about. But if you buy one of the first gens and it has that issue, it is covered under a recall, and you just take it to the Mini dealership and they'll repair it. All right, I'm going to talk to you about toggle switches because everyone loves toggle switches in their cars, and the Mini is no exception. Now, there are there are 6 different toggle switches here for this car. There is the driver's side window, the automatic stability control, door locks, rear fog light, front fog light, and the passenger seat. Now, some of them don't have all these switches. If you don't have fog lights, you're not going to have both of those fog switches, but some do. So that's kind of a neat little thing to have in these cars. It's kind of fun just to play around with them. I know that for a while, Mini had a kit that you could get different decals that had everything like an oil slick, an ejection seat, all sorts of funny little stickers just to mess with your passengers. Naturally, we got the center speedometer. That's a common thing in all of them. Mine did not have a center speedometer. It had something called a chrono pack, which had different gauges. Now, some of these also had navigation systems, so you wouldn't have the center speedometer. In that instance, you would have something mounted up here called the Mickey Mouse ears, as some of us in the community call them, which is basically you have the tach and the speedometer right next to each other. This chili red example also has the Harman Kardon sound system. Now, what is that? You get upgraded tweeters in the doors, you get upgraded speakers, you get an upgraded head unit, and that's pretty much it. Different trim around the speakers as well. That was an option worth having. A lot of my Mini friends have them. I had it in 2 of my Minis. I don't have it in my current one, but it's not an option that I miss terribly given the fact that I have the John Cooper Works exhaust. But if you enjoy listening to your music, I recommend the Harman Kardon if you're going to buy one of these. Okay, now if any of you love to drive your car, you're going to have issues with rocks. Now, the Mini has the aerodynamic characteristics of, well, frankly, a brick. So, you could have a lovely little crack in your windshield, and this one has one. Now, a brand new windshield for a Mini will set you back probably in the $500 to $700 range if you buy OEM windshields. Now, if you buy aftermarket, they're around $300. If you're insured, then you should be covered. But that's providing you had it as an accident and you didn't actually like break it on purpose, like someone jumping over your car. But highly doubt that's going to happen. In the case of this, that's an easy fix. If you're going to go autocross racing, don't autocross with a cracked windshield. They won't let you race it anyway. But not something to be too concerned about. These cars were still built very well. Another thing to be concerned about, well, not too concerned about unless you're that concerned, is rock chips. Now, these cars, being the way they are, you will get little rocks hitting your hood, hitting your windshield, hitting the leading edges of your car. In this case, this car was no exception. It's gotten quite a few little dings and dents here and chips. They do sell touch-up paint from Mini that you can use to patch this. However, if it gets this extensive, I would recommend probably having the whole hood repainted, which is a bit expensive, but something to look for. So if you are looking for a clean example of a Mini, I'd recommend looking for one that has very few of these rock chips. There's not going to be many that don't have some form of a chip on them because of the way that aerodynamics are on the car. It's not something to be too concerned about. I wouldn't use that as a reason to dissuade you from buying one. Well, I hope you enjoyed seeing an R53 and learning a little bit about the car and about what to look for when buying one. Now, they are still good vehicles. There are tons out there. Don't be dissuaded by the fact that there are so many little things to look for problem-wise. They are still solid vehicles, and I would even buy this one. Even with the problems that I showed you, I would still probably buy it. It's a great vehicle. They're still very fun to drive, and once you get in one of these and hear that supercharger wind up, I should say, you're going to be hooked. And this is what got me hooked into Mini Coopers, and I still miss my first Mini. You'll never forget your first Mini, no matter how old you get. But I hope you enjoyed this, and I will look forward to sharing another Mini with you all next time. So until then, remember, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. Thanks for watching.